Hi, my name is Emilio.
My name's Nathan.
And welcome to Crash Course. Today we'll be talking about three special civilizations: the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca.
But first, we're going to talk about the Mayans, since they came first. The Maya were a civilization located in Mesopotamia, known for their vast achievements,
Such as their extraordinary irrigation systems, precise calendars,
which would later lead to the 2012 apocalypse scare.
written languages, art, mathematics, the list goes on.
The Mayans were located in areas such as what is now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador.
Their landscape mostly consisted of green land and forests until they chopped down the trees to make room for their cities and statues and such.
Unfortunately, due to the decrease in rainfall caused by deforestation, droughts made it hard for them to store food and for plants to survive.
Lots of people died during these droughts, either due to starvation or to dehydration. Wasn't pretty. Anyway, politics.
What was unique about the Maya was that they were never really under one ruler or empire. In fact, the people were split into multiple city-states, each having its own king to govern it.
The rulers consisted of kings from dynasties and were each called Aha at the time. Also, the Mayan law system seems pretty fair.
The set of laws were the same for each city and were centered around equality.
Surprisingly, everyone was subjected to the same laws, even the higher and lesser nobles.
If someone commits a crime and is found guilty, the punishment for said crime depended on the crime itself, not based on social hierarchy.
More about social hierarchy later, but now economics.
Despite the previously mentioned deforestation they caused, the Mayans excelled in agriculture.
The infrequent but heavy rain caused vegetation to continually thrive on even the rockiest of landscape, leading to the growth of tons of vegetables and fruits. They also utilized the limited rain by using cisterns to store some of the rainwater and distribute it to the land evenly.
They domesticated many animals,
And even ate small hairless dogs, but later started eating other animals introduced by the Spanish before they invaded their land years later. More about that later on.
They used stone tools and flint axes, and used a technique known as the slash and burn method to clear out the land, which involved slashing away at grass and trees and then burning them.
Which nowadays is totally illegal and get you arrested for arson. Believe me, I tried.
Some of their valuable resources included obsidian, gold, jade, and copper,
Which could be found nearly anywhere in the Mayan cities due to their vast amount of free market trading. Yes, due to how large their cities were, there was a lot of free market trading to go around.
They didn't have any established form of currency, but they used items such as cacao beans and jade bells as forms of money.
With all these vast resources, it practically begged for extensive trade.
Which they did. They extensively traded with other different civilizations, including the Olmec, the Teotihuacan, and much more.
Now on to culture.
They were masters of artwork and artisanship, creating a plethora of different jewelry, pottery, cloaks, and dresses.
Their religious beliefs involve polytheism and bloodletting, to which they believe that sacrificing people's hearts and torturing others for their own blood to their gods would please them, with most of the tortured people being slaves. Yeah, pretty gruesome. Also, they held high regard for their kings, believing them to be gods, and even performed some sacrifices for them.
The Maya were the first civilization to use hieroglyphics as a form of writing. They used over 500 of them.
They also figured out the concept of zero way before the Europeans ever did.
The social classes for the Mayans went as king, rich people and priests, workers and artisans, and then farmers and slaves.
The status for these people were usually hereditary. If your father was a farmer, you were a farmer. Very rarely would exception be made.
Men were usually rulers and heads of the household, but women had considerable amounts of freedom. They could get involved in government, religion, and much more.
Unfortunately, despite their achievements in culture and agriculture, the Mayans were very violent people, as shown by some of their religious beliefs and practices.
They frequently engaged in war with other civilizations around them, such as the Tikal, who were a very dominant force at the time. They also had conflicts with the Spanish conquistadors, as they frequently tried to take over the Mayan land.
However, by far the most interesting thing was their decline.
No one knows for sure what caused their decline, but some say the factors involved overpopulation, severe droughts, constant warfare, and overuse of the land.
By 1000 AD, most of the Mayan city-states were abandoned and were then taken over by the Spanish, leaving it all a mystery and a topic used for heavy discussion. I say aliens have something to do with it.
Stop it, no they didn't. Anyways, the Mayans did leave behind a bunch of teachings and artwork that we still use today.
Plus, there are even some Mayan descendants out there that are still alive today.
And now it's time for the open letter. But first, let's open the secret compartment.
Chocolate, huh? You know, I have a strong craving for stuff, but I know I'm not the only one. Science. Chocolate. Yes, chocolate. More specifically, cocoa beans. What's your guys' deal on this stuff anyway? Look, I know every now and then you like to eat some of it since it's so good. Trust me, I feel the same way. But you guys have serious issues with this stuff. You praise it as being the food of the gods, and you make artwork of your people drinking chocolate beverages, and then use the beans for human sacrifices, marriage and religious purposes, and medicine? Also, you guys probably created the first version of the Ziploc baggies since you like chocolate so much and wanted to eat it like all the time. You packed them in small rounded slabs for your soldiers, warriors, and people to eat while on the run or something. In fact, because of your invention of chocolate, you got the Aztec all hyped up on this stuff and caused them to have an obsession for it. Which brings us to our next subject, the Aztec.
The Aztec, also known as the Mexica, were a civilization turned empire, located in what is now known as central and southern Mexico. They appeared in early 13th century, but flourished around 1325 AD.
Known for their conquest and military dominance, the Aztecs have been considered barbaric by many due to their violent nature, but were also known to have a lot of incredible feats.
Elements of their own tradition suggested that they were originally hunter-gatherers that were located in northern Mexico before moving down south.
There in the south, they founded their holy city Tenochtitlan at Lake Texcoco and quickly became the dominant force of Mexico through conquest and alliance.
The Aztec were originally nomadic, always moving around.
Also because no one wanted them since they were always killing other people for no reason.
The Aztec had a legend stating that if they saw an eagle on top of a cactus, holding a snake in his mouth, then it would be a signal that they had found their permanent home, and would build a capital city there.
One day in the Valley of Mexico near Lake Texcoco, a priest saw exactly that and told the others about it. From then on, they stayed at that location and created their holy city, Tenochtitlan, which now leads us to the politics.
After founding Tenochtitlan, the Aztec began to establish themselves as an empire rather than just a civilization. Their government was built around military and conquest and also centered around city-states.
Their rulers consisted of emperors, each one called a Huitlani, which means great speaker, and are chosen by a group of high-ranking nobles. The emperor had control over the military and also had absolute political power. Said ruler was also worshipped as a god.
Surprisingly though, whenever the Aztec conquered a piece of inhabited land, they would allow their newly conquered people to continue doing their own things.
With one exception, they had to pay tributes to the empire or else the death of their people will be met.
The laws set for the Aztec people were quite simple, but the punishments for breaking the laws were very severe. The most common punishment would be death. Other punishments include having your hair shaved off or mutilation. They also formed alliances with some of their neighbors to expand their dominating force.
The Aztec were also surprisingly well organized with their government and military, which would explain their frequent victories in conquest and battles. Next up, economics.
The Aztec relied heavily on agriculture, but had remarkable systems of it, specifically with farming.
Since they lived near a lake, they adapted to farming skills quick. They had elaborate systems of irrigation to try to make use of the sloped terrain they used for farming. The crops grew very well on the fertile soil, and as a result, they grew a wide spread of crops and vegetables.
Trade was extremely important to the Aztec. It was part of their own culture. They practically traded nearly anything they had.
This was likely due to their previously mentioned vast amount of crops, along with their domesticated animals and their different forms of currency, which included cocoa beans, Aztec cloth, and even children. Yes, that's right, they used children as currency. Why? Mainly because, as previously stated before, they practically traded nearly anything they had, plus culture and stuff.
Due to their extensive trading, the merchants had to pull off a lot of hard work. Ultimately, this led to them constantly demanding higher respect and social status. More on their status later.
Now let's move on to culture. Long story short, like the Mayans, the Aztec culture was both complicated and screwed up. Like the Mayans, they were polytheistic, And also like the Mayans, they commonly practiced human sacrifices for their many gods. Their gods were based around specific things such as agriculture or life and death, and had complicated names to suit them.
However, the Aztecs' religion was syncretistic, meaning they absorbed different beliefs and elements from other Mesoamerican cultures into their own, including other gods.
Adding more to the complexity, the Aztec were apparently highly sociable, intellectual, and artistic, despite their supposed barbaric and warlike nature previously stated.
They deeply valued education and pushed the children into it.
Like the Mayans, they loved chocolate, and also like the Mayans, they liked it a lot. They even made a chocolate drink consisting of cocoa beans, peppers, cornmeal, and spices. This was due to the fact that they didn't have sugar back then. Now I'm going to try some.
Oh, are you sure that's safe?
Yes. If it was fine back then, it'll be fine now. Anyway, the social classes consisted of nobles, commoners, serfs, and slaves.
What was interesting about slaves was that they could buy their freedom and even own land.
Aztec men were often filled with ambition to earn glory and to feel important towards others and their family, most of the time by participating in war.
Aztec women were very limited in freedom. They were destined by supposed fate to only be married and to become housewives, nothing more. In fact, their only apparent role in life was to care for the house, children, and husband.
Inequality at its finest. Due to their barbaric and violent behavior along with their constant conquest, the Aztec participated in many wars and conflicts with other civilizations and groups, along with their own conquered subordinates, resulting in them being not well liked by many.
The most prominent confliction being with the Spanish, who ordered a conquest for Mexico in 1519, including the Aztec and their land. The conquest was led by Hernan Cortez, having an army of Spaniards and allies that eventually led him to successfully conquer the Aztec and their holy city, Tenochtitlan, officially ending Aztec reign in 1533.
Yeah, the allies Cortez recruited were those of Aztec conquered people and neighbors of the Aztecs, who didn't like him. Surprisingly, there were a lot of these people and were each easily convinced by Cortez to fight the Aztec, overwhelming the empire.
To recap, the Aztec were hated by many due to their barbaric nature, but also had a well-organized empire, surprisingly being civilized. Before we go, we'll talk a little bit about the Inca Empire.
The Inca people originated from ancient Peru. They flourished around 1400 CE to 1533 CE, eventually spreading across the land, reaching all the way from Quito in the north and to Santiago in the south.
They ruled 2,500 miles of land. They conquered and exploited a different variety of landscapes. They created strong buildings and cities. The famous Machu Picchu was built around 1460 to 1470 CE.
Their capital was called Cusco. No, not that Cusco. And was located in Peru. The capital became the center of everything. They considered it to be the navel of the world.
Their official language was Quechua. They didn't really have a writing system, but had a counting device to keep records of important information called the quipus. It consisted of variously colored thread and was knotted in different ways.
Their calendar was similar to ours, as it had 12 months but 30 days in every month. Each month they would celebrate a festival.
They practiced polytheism. Their main gods were Intu, sun god, and Mamakia, moon goddess. They practiced burial offerings. Human sacrifices were a part of the rituals. They saw it as an honor to die for an offering.
Quite a contrast from the other two civilizations, huh? Anyway, the people had different job occupations and each played a role in the empire and had something different to offer to it. The society was made up of islets, clans of families who worked together.
In the empire, they all dressed in the same fashion. The poor and the rich would dress similarly. They valued their cloth more than their metal. Despite this, however, social classes still existed. Their social classes went as emperor and his family, nobles, public administration, and finally commoners.
Education was split into two: education for upper class and education for general population. Higher class men could marry a lot of wives. Lower class men could only have one wife.
The hairstyles in this society were important. Different social classes had different types of hairstyles. It made clear what position you were in.
They farmed a variety of crops, but their most important ones were corn and potatoes. Like the Maya and the Aztec, they also made chocolate. Yes, chocolate again. Though they did make it out of a different material, cocoa leaves. Also, mostly everyone in the Inca farmed.
Because of tax obligations, family had to pay taxes on land they worked. They could pay it by working for the Inca or working in mines. The Inca were known for their gold and silver. They had a lot of it, but it was taken when the Spaniards came and destroyed the empire.
The Inca Empire ended because of war with the Spanish. The Spanish conquistadors came and took the empire's gold, goods, and land. They killed the emperor and most of the natives, but left some alive so that they could exploit them for things such as slavery and working in the mines. Diseases brought by the Spaniards also ravaged the land and killed many natives. The death of the empire officially marked the end of the empire at around 1527.
In the end, the Incas were remembered as a strong, great, short-lived empire. This was Crash Course, and we'll be leaving off with this question. How did the three civilizations significantly affect Central and South America, even today? I'm Nathan.
I'm Emilio.
And thanks for watching.